everyone. I think it's now the time. So, yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Alicia. My preferred pronouns are she or they. I will be the chair of this debate. Welcome to round 3 of ADU Online. Judging with me today is...
Kat, please.
Thanks. And now I'll ask you to introduce yourselves and state your preferred pronouns. If you have ones, feel free to not do that. Yeah, so let's start with OG. Who is speaking first?
Hi, I'm Clinton, speaking first.
Sorry, can you repeat?
I'm sorry, am I clear? Hello?
Yes, you are. I had it a little bit too low, I guess.
Sorry, no worries, my bad. My name is Clinton. I'll be speaking first for OG. He, please.
I'm Ethan. I'll be speaking second, no preference.
Thank you, OO.
Helena speaking first, she or they, please.
And Ruben speaking second here.
CG.
Hey, Artem speaking first, he please.
And speaking second?
The second is Victor, preferred noun is he. Yes.
Thank you. And CO?
Benedict speaking first, I prefer he.
Hilda speaking second, she or they, please.
Okay, thank you very much. Note that this round is being streamed live on YouTube right now. I will time you and I will write in the chat at 1, 6, and 7th minute when they will pass. But please also do time yourself. I might forget sometimes. Something might happen. I might not write. Like there are different things. So please do time yourselves and time others to know when to ask POIs. Remember about how to ask POIs. So yeah, without further ado, that's all from me. I invite the Prime Minister to start a debate that stands for their side. Here.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes.
Thank you. So just let me get my... Are we, is there going to be a timer for us? I don't see the timer though.
No, please, I
no.
won't put a timer here, so please do time yourself and I will write on the chat at 1st, 6th, and 7th minute.
Oh, no problem, thank you.
No problem.
Ladies and gentlemen, for generations, the amount of work and the type of work we can do has been limited by geography. We often have to move to cities in order to do the most productive, the most fulfilling, and the most highly paid jobs. We think that ends now. And during COVID, untimely as it may be and sad as it may be, a disaster has shown us the correct way for properly allocating the workforce. This debate is ultimately how we create the most productive workforce and how we create a more equal opportunities to enter the workforce. And not just the workforce in general, but specific jobs that people want to get into. Our stance on this is simple. Government will provide subsidies for Zoom programs or any applications you need to work from home for every company. They provide tax rebate or subsidies or benefits to companies that will implement this or allow their employees to work from home if they wish to. Going on into our arguments, we have 3 arguments for today. Oh, sorry, just to clarify, we're also talking about only work that can be done from home. This means lawyers and I don't know, coders, for example, right? We won't require or we won't try to incentivize hairdressers or doctors to do their job from home. Going into our 3 arguments, firstly, equality, second, productivity, and thirdly, environment. Firstly, on equality, we argue that this policy creates more equal opportunities for workers to enter specific jobs that they want, especially workers who come from predominantly rural areas. This need not even be really rural. It could just be a small town that is not in one of the mega cities. Right? I'm not sure in the UK what examples you have, but I don't know, examples of it might be Manchester or Liverpool, which are kind of cities, but not really big in themselves or as big as London. We think currently there's a huge barrier to working in the most profitable and high-paying firms. And more often than not, these high-paying firms are also the firms that generate a lot of passion for individuals. This means, like, for example, if I'm a lawyer, I'll prefer to work at a higher-paying firm, at a bigger firm, because I do more important projects and it gives me more fulfillment. However, the problem is that most of these firms are located in mega cities or big cities, right? This means poor individuals, often minorities, are unable to access jobs here for two main reasons. Number one, they will have to uproot and leave the communities that they were in and that they were very comfortable with, which was in their rural towns, right? These communities in outskirts, note that these communities are also more tight-knit compared to the ones in the mega cities. Therefore, them uprooting has more of a disadvantage and is hugely persuasive in them making them stay instead of going to the cities where they can actually pursue a better life for themselves. Second is they will have to pay for crazy high rent in London. In London, if you want to get a small tiny room that is equivalent to Harry Potter's bedroom underneath the staircase, you will have to pay £200 a week. That's atrocious, and no poor individual will want to do that and also risk uprooting himself from his community for a job. We think this is a huge barrier for people entering such jobs in cities. We solve this problem in three ways, right? By incentivizing work from home, number one, they will no longer need to uproot themselves from home. So it no longer becomes a choice between their family and work. They can have the best of both worlds. Second, even for individuals who, secondly, the way it allows people to go work in these places is that the rent is lower in these places, right? This means this affects people whose jobs don't, this affects or helps people whose jobs don't provide work from home, because these are individuals who may have to go to the city to work. They are better able to go work here because the rent will be lower, given that a lot of individuals will now be working from home. Therefore, demand for housing in London or other big cities will be much lower, rent will be much more affordable, allowing these individuals to access work here. Thirdly, those with children often have to hire a sitter or often have to have someone take care of the children at home while they work. But if they can work at home, they have less need to hire such a sitter. A lot of minorities and poor individuals are able to hire a full sitter. Therefore, they're more able to engage in this sort of work if they hire just a part-time sitter and are able to work from home. This solves a lot of problems that these minorities and poor individuals have. The impacts of this are threefold. Number one, we have a more diverse workforce, right? Within innovation and creativity are mainly the result of having diverse people of all backgrounds to engage in a sort of collaborative effort. You get this when you have more people from rural areas engaging in your companies. This means that your company isn't dominated by the rich, white city dwellers who have grown their whole entire lives in the city and know no other perspective. But having people from different towns allows you to get and aggregate and get the most out of the creative destruction that comes out from these individuals. Secondly, I'll take your PRI in a second. Secondly, we think it creates more equality. This is the second impact. But you have more equality because poor minorities are now better able to access the higher paying jobs in town. Of course, we understand that poor minorities are less likely to have the credentials to overcome most of those rich people in the cities anyways, but we think that there are still a lot of minorities who live in rural areas who have credentials, who have gone to, good schools and do have very smart and are very capable, but the big barrier is that they are unable to move to the city. We think that these individuals will be able to create a more equal workspace. But thirdly, it's just a better allocation of resources, right? Because if you're more qualified individuals now being able to come to the city to work, it just means the jobs goes to the most qualified individual. But yes, POI from OO.
A lot of these people are low skilled, and low skilled works very often are not able to be done from home. What this is incentivizing is that we are not developing these places where these people live and just make it worse on the long run for the people who cannot work from home.
So yeah, so I get that this will primarily affect coders and all that. But number one, a lot of poor individuals, or as in less rich individuals do take coding, so they will to some extent also be affected by this. But second, as I told you before, even those who do not engage in work that can be done from home, they will still benefit from cheaper rent in the cities. Understand that labor-intensive work in the cities are still higher paid than the labor-intensive jobs outside the cities. Therefore, a lot of poor individuals can still gain from this proposal. Our second argument is about productivity. When people spend less time commuting, they ultimately spend more time doing the work that they were employed to do. This means instead of sitting 1 hour on a tube every single day, they can use that 1 hour to generate more productivity for the company. Either that or use that to relax and to relax and refresh themselves to be more productive for the rest of the day. Second reason is that people working from home generally feel more comfortable with their environment, with their family nearby. They don't have to worry about whether or not their grandma is actually falling down the steps or whether or not their children are missing them or skipping school, stuff like that. They will have divided attention if they're at work and their family is at home. But now that they're together, they're better able to be productive and to churn out better quality work. I think for all these reasons, we're very proud to propose. Thank you.
Thank you to the Prime Minister for this fine speech. And to start the debate on the opposition side, I invite the leader of the opposition. Here.
Awesome. Cool. 3, 2, 1. When your home is also your work-life balance is going to be so screwed up that in the end, you probably will hate both, or at least your family will hate you for it. But first of all, a little bit of rebuttal here. Like, first of all, like, London is not going to be suddenly cheaper for everybody. Why? Because living in London still has all of the benefits of living in London that does have nothing to do with work. Like, for example, cultural options, shopping, just literally having all of those things around. So we believe that still people want to live in London, because you don't only want to live in London because London is London. But so it's not going to be cheaper. But the second thing is, if we're encouraging people to stay at home, we're also discouraging the need to improve workplaces, the need to improve the commuting system and all of those things. And what is very important to note is that many jobs, as OG said, will never get online. But if we're encouraging working from home, it also means that going to work becomes less important, less relevant. Like, doing both is very unlikely to be happening. But Ruben will be dealing with all of this. I'm going to be dealing with my own case. 2 parts here. First of all, the complete loss of work-life balance, and then secondly, challenging the claim from OG about effectivity and why we actually have more effectivity if you go to your place. So complete loss of work-life balance. Like, OG wants to say there's going to be best of both worlds. We will claim you it's the worst of both worlds. So first of all, what is important to note here is that you're going to be always at work. Your work is going to be home. And like when OG said, it's like a really good thing that now you do not have to commute anymore. But what we're saying is that this idea of you having to commute also means that once you leave the room, leave your office, once you go to commute within the situation, you are gone. That means you are not going to be returning there, because it might be a little bit more of a traffic. But here to note there, like, this ridiculous amounts of commute is a very American system. It is not that bad in most of Europe or Asia, where you do have a functioning system of public transport. So it's not that big of a thing. But what it especially means is your door is closed. But once you are at home, that also means that your office is probably 5 meters away from you where you are. This has 2 impacts. Number one, we believe that people are more likely to be working longer hours because, well, they can do it. And there's like this one thing which is still on the table. And once that you are so close to the one thing that is still on the table, it is going to be internally bugging you quite a lot of things. So we believe that people are very likely to be dealing with this one thing which is going to be left on the table, and this one thing really gets a lot over time within the situation. But second of all, we are also seeing in the corona situation, we believe it's going to be continuing, that the employer actually is abusing the possibility that they are just so close to the computer that they're saying, oh, could you please answer this one email? And we are not actually saying that this is seeing that this is changing. Like, obviously you can say, oh no, we are going to be blocking it, but a lot of the working hours are under the table. You do have to work strange hours because you still have your family life to be covered within the situation. That means like this control of work hours is entirely impossible to be doing in the situation, given that you are going to be working flexible hours within the time. So what this is going to be leading to is that you're less likely to have more free time within the situation, and that you're going to use the time that you would be on commuting for even more work. Like, we already see this with a lot of self-employed people who are working, or people who are working in farming and all of those different things. They are working constantly because they're literally 10 meters away from where they are working. Second impact here is the family, and there is we do believe that this is a big issue and important to note. Your family always has to deal with it. Like if dad is in the business meeting, that means the children have to be quiet. That means that everybody has to adapt to the working situation there. That means that the people cannot live as freely as possible as they can. This is especially problematic when we are talking about families with small children. Second of here, it also increases the feeling of dad doesn't have time for the situation. Like we see this very often, that small children just do not understand. They're coming back from kindergarten. They're at but they don't even go to kindergarten anymore because you do not have the company kindergarten. They will not understand why mom, who is currently working, doesn't have the time. It always will lead to the situation that the children feel that their parents are there, but are not there for them. And this is not only about kindergarten age, but even when the children are older, this is going to be continuing. What this is leading to is that the family will feel and does feel less accepted by them. And third impact here, there's less help to create a compatibility. Currently, we see, like, if you want your parents, your people to come, you will offer things like an in-work daycare or all of those different things. Or once you are gone, it is much more accepted that you're not looking after your child and send them to daycare if you're not at home. We like have the societal pressure, but less of an interest as well from the company to be doing this. What does this do? An incredible increase of gender roles in society. Like we've seen this through Corona a lot. Childcare is less, it's happening less. Children are more at home, which we believe still is going to be happening because mom is at home, so you don't have to spend the daycare money. This is going to be an impact where people are going to be trying to save less money, which means that especially women are going to be discriminated, because like even if it should be that way, we see that it is always the woman who ends up doing the childcare. What this is going to be creating is that maybe men are more effective, which is going to be creating to the situation where we adding to the gender discrepancy between them, the possibility of this going to be happening. So what we're creating is that people are working more burned out, families are less accepted, and third of all, women are less likely to be accepted because they will be seen as less effective. OG, go quickly.
Won't it be easier to say that the father should do some of the child caring if the father is at home?
Obviously that it would be easier to do this, but fact is we don't do it. Like this is one of the very big things. We could be doing it, but we don't, because it's generally accepted the woman does it. The woman is supposed to be doing this, and very often it is still seen that the man's job does it. Like there's not even like a good analytical reason. It's just the fact that this is currently happening in Corona, and it is very likely to be continuing here because being nurturing is still a woman's job apparently. Now effectivity. Number one, work environment. Like not being in your home also means that you're not closer to all of those distractions. For example, your family, but also literally just Netflix. Like being in the situation when you have them. But second of all, the social impact. You have less work support within the situation. Why is work support so important? Number one, spontaneous ideas. Just sitting next to your neighbors, you are cooperating. You're going to be doing it less when you always have to like go back to your Zoom meeting, have to call somebody instead of just turning around to your teammate. Second of all, cooperation. It is much harder to be working together when you're not sitting next to each other because you always have this barrier between you. Third of all, inspiration. Just having somebody next to you working does make you work more. Therefore, you're gonna be more effective within the situation. But then, lastly, like it makes those things much more fun when you are together with them. In order to make it more effective, but especially in order to have less burnout and a happier family, we back you to oppose.
Thank you very much for this fine speech, and I invite the Deputy Prime Minister to continue the case for the government side. Hear, hear.
Am I audible? Thank you. I'll just set my timer up. Two main issues in my speech. First, what PM told you about productivity and how working from home uniquely brings about greater productivity, both in companies and in the economy. Second, directly clashing with OO's material on the separation of professional and personal life and why working from home actually increases that clear delineation between professional and personal life. It's a bit counterintuitive, but I'm going to explain why working from home means individual employees will be more incentivized to figure out strategies to actually tell their employer, this is my working hour, this is not, this is when you can contact me, and this is when you can't, right? We think in status quo, there's a lot of overflow among working professionals in cities from their work life to their personal life already, and they don't have a say because the employer can just be like, well, but you're at home, you're working from the comfort of your sofa, why not you just get these slides done or whatever? But when you're working from home, you have a much bigger say in a much bigger case in trying to claim to your employer. There needs to be a clear delineation. Before that, right, some characterization. We think it's a bit misrepresentative of or to just say that, oh, there'll be absolutely no boundaries. We think that obviously there'll be some boundaries drawn up. If working from home becomes a societal norm, there will be new contracts and new regulations to reflect this. Some things that are possible, right? Having very clear working hours, having very clear regulations on when you can take breaks, how long and why. Things like having very clear modes of communication that are exclusively allowed for professional contact. For example, you can email me, but you can't text me on Facebook. We can talk via Zoom, but not on WhatsApp. Things like that can make the delineation between personal and professional life still very apparent in both the heads of the employers and the employees. And another final piece of characterization is that they talk about low-skilled work and how this will go abandoned. The vast majority of work that can be done from home is digital and virtual in nature. So we are talking exclusively about working professionals in status quo, and in status quo, they disproportionately work in cities because that's where the big MNC headquarters are, that's where the big companies' offices are, right? So some rebuttals now towards OO. First, on this idea of low-skilled work, two responses. First, we think that if anything, the single biggest factor of rural to urban migration is employment. Yes, it's true that there are non-work pull factors to a city, but those are usually side perks. You move there for work and you also get to party on Saturday, right? That's good for you. But the primary reason, like incentivizing these rural people to move to urban areas is to look for work, right? And without the need to move to cities to get work, removing that barrier of entry means there necessarily be a huge significant fall in the level of urban migration, meaning living costs will obviously fall. So this means, crucially, directly clashing with OO, that the low-skilled workers who are already in the city doing physical work, right, construction workers, hairdressers, doctors, whatever, sorry, not doctors, like they will be able to survive more easily within the city because there's less of all these working professionals moving into London to try to compete with me on the tube or for living resources. Second response is that when you have a greater presence of working professionals in rural areas, this creates natural incentives for the government and for private companies to develop those areas, right? Because you have lots of consumers now in those villages and in those towns. Because previously, when all the most high income earning people all move to the city, there's no reason for businesses to enter there to expand. There's no reason for government to invest in infrastructure, communication, technology projects there. But now when you have such a big community of working professionals in these rural areas, that's when you equalize the development between the big cities and the smaller rural areas, right? And then they had these a few more ideas about how low-skilled work will never go online and it's somehow inequality. But this debate is not about low-skilled work. Like it's about high-skilled work that is virtual and can be done online. Then they talk about family, and this is quite a big point, right? About how children will feel abandoned by their parents. Okay, so in status quo, parents either move out from their house to a different city completely, seeing their children once a month, or work super late hours and come home to their child already asleep. We think the comparative where the parent is at home and can tend to emergencies, for example, and with sympathetic employers, is much better. We think that if anything, it equalizes gender roles because fathers can now play an active role, if not equal, but more active role than status quo in children's upbringing. We think if anything, this is better under our side. And they talk about how separation of professional and personal life becomes very nebulous, right? So two responses. First, in status quo, many working professionals already have their work overflow into personal life. And like I said in my intro, there is no moral claim for them to tell their employer, we need clearer separation. Now you increase that separation, right? But second, under status quo, the social dynamic in a workplace is very important for getting ahead. You need to go out with your colleagues after work. You need to socialize. You need to drink with your boss. Things like that are implicit, but very clear in existing power structures in getting promotions, for example. All these things disappear, which means that an aggregate amount of time you spend interacting with your colleagues, interacting with your bosses actually falls. We think there are a lot of practical strategies to having that clear separation in your house. For example, having specific regions of your house, right, correspond to work and to family, or things like agreeing on taking extended lunch breaks because you have a baby. Things like that are a lot more feasible and practical when you have working from home. Finally, final extension on productivity. 3 reasons why we get better productivity. First, you have more motivated and healthier employees, both mentally and physically. In the vast majority of cases, your home is simply a more comfortable environment to work with. And when you're more comfortable, you're going to be more motivated, right? And when you have a bit more ownership over when you're doing what and how you're doing, what you're wearing, things like that, you're going to feel more comfortable. And I think it's lots of scientific studies have shown that your motivation is a lot more important than the amount of hours you actually put into work, right? Second reason before that,
your home is very quickly going to be your workplace where you're consistently working all of the time. This means we are taking away the relaxation factor of your workplace and just make it worse.
For the vast majority of working professionals, you have to work overtime anyway under status quo, right? You already lose that relaxation. You already associate your bed with, preparing presentations for the next day. But instead now, you can have a desk and tell your boss, when I move to the bed, that's when you stop contacting me. That's when I put my work laptop away and take my personal devices out, right? We think that delineation is clearer because you have a stronger moral claim to that. Second reason why productivity is better under our side, employers and companies simply have access to a larger talent pool. Clinton told you a bunch of reasons why a lot of people who previously couldn't even apply for these jobs in the first place, can now apply for them by virtue of just numbers, right? The more people you can choose from, the more competent the people you employ are likely to be. This increases productivity, like per se, within any companies, even regardless of work from home. And finally, there's greater collaboration. In the globalized world, it's even easier to work with teams in other geographical regions, in other countries, for example. This is when you don't stifle innovation and creativity, and this is when you get more diverse groups as well. They want to talk about socioeconomically disadvantaged people. This is when the people, socioeconomically disadvantaged people, can actually apply for these jobs, right? Yes, they may still be structurally disadvantaged. At least they can apply for them. Previously, they couldn't even move to London because it was too expensive to even interview for that job. So we think 2 benefits that OG uniquely brings to you. First, greater productivity and equality, and second, a clearer separation between your professional and personal life. Try to propose.
Thank you very much for this fine speech. And to close the debate on opening tables, I invite the Deputy Leader of Opposition. Here.
Am I audible? Yeah, perfect. I'm just setting things up. Cool. Panel, this is one of those motions where on a weird meta level, debating itself is actually a good illustration of the situation. Yes, I'm now not paying 50% of my monthly income to get last-minute Ryanair tickets. Yes, people do now not have to go to the trouble of staying at a cramped place for 3 nights. And yes, poorer and disenfranchised people now have more access to debating. But we'd still, I think, all, or at least in the vast majority, prefer to be in Kazakhstan right now, or in London, or in Leiden, or in Dublin. And why is that? I think it's because many things are lost digitally, right? And it's because the home, which has been treated for centuries as a refuge and a getaway from work, is the home. And that makes it a bad place for work and a bad place for social exchange, right? And basically what I'm going to do in my substantive is hammer home the point why exactly it is better for the vast majority of the people to actually work somewhere where they can physically be together with their colleagues, right? Second piece of framing, we are very happy with work from home being a thing for people with disabilities, for people who cannot currently commute, right? It is becoming more and more of a thing before coronavirus without any incentivizing, right? And this is, we believe, good, but incentivizing it in a vast majority, as government has said, so that this is the new work standard, has a lot of disadvantages, right? Before I talk about my substantive points, some extraneous rebuttal. So firstly, OG had a very interesting point on better cities, right? And I want to point out as an example, Vienna does not have the problem London has, or Dublin has, or San Francisco has. Why do they not have these problems? Because of social housing. Yes, building a lot of social housing in changing cities is unavailable in the short term, but yes, it is much better in the long term. Why? I think there are many advantages of living in a city, especially for an aging population that opening government didn't talk about, right? Access to healthcare, access to social institutions is extremely important for poor, disenfranchised, and old people. Access to cultural consumption, right? Just access to the communities, access to shops, right? All of this is something that has made cities attractive apart from working there. So On the comparative side, we think it's much better and sustainable to change the cities instead of changing the people. Also, there will still always be rural people who just live there, who run farms. There's also work being done on the countryside. It's not just cities and the countryside. You can't extrapolate from the way the United Kingdom is being run to all of the other countries of the European Union, right? And these people, I think, will be much less in focus now. Secondly, opening government says there will be great working regulations. The problem is they already don't exist in the workplace now, right? The extreme problem is that the workers' unions are losing power. This means workers lose privileges and more surveillance happens. It's very unclear why the workers' unions should now get higher power now that everybody works at home and it's physically harder for them to unite, right? So we think A, this, and B, work is just going to be always on your mind because your brain associates your work with your home, right? And this is something you cannot do away with by having great regulations on when emails have to be answered. You can't stop people from thinking about how they would answer an email, right? Then, after this extraneous rebuttal, first point, what we lose by not being at the workplace. And I think the first thing I want to talk about, and my partner has already talked about, is spontaneous cooperation. And that also ties in with the second point about effectivity I'm going to make. Notice the thing that doesn't happen at these digital debating tournaments is that people who don't usually meet themselves talk to each other because everyone is just sitting in some waiting rooms or on a Discord server and some people are posting things, but not a lot of communication is actually happening. This is why the effect of spontaneous cooperation, the benefit of it, is the reason why co-working spaces led Apple or Google to invest millions and billions into rebuilding their entire Apple campus so that more co-working can happen. People who don't work in the same institution suddenly come together, go drinking coffee, go doing something that is perhaps not work-related, and suddenly new ideas occur. All of that is far harder digitally, right? Far harder. Against that, government claims now people internationally can meet, right? But this was a thing before. Cisco Systems and Zoom were big companies before the Corona crisis, precisely because that unique benefit was reaped by companies before by having people internationally meet themselves. We're not against that. Still, telecommuting and working from home was not a standard thing. Secondly, you're going to be more lonely. Less friendships will happen. Notice that a lot of grown-up people, the best way for them to meet other people is actually at work, right? Is actually to be together with their colleagues and share some time with them. It's very hard to make friends, and I can see that with all of the students I'm teaching when you just meet people via Zoom, right? It's even harder. It's also hard to make friends when you just have WhatsApp calls. This is something, a social aspect of work that is going to be lost, right? Thirdly, the possibility to show and to develop soft skills is also something that gets lost, right? The possibility to promote people on the basis of the soft skills that they have shown is really hard to evaluate when all you see is the artificial situation of somebody talking to you via Zoom. I think all of these are good reasons for why physically working at the workplace is something that is valuable, right? Second point on effectivity. Opening government has made a big case of saying it's going to make workers now more productive. And I think it's very simple to see that this is untrue. The proof itself is capitalism. If that were true, companies, especially in the United States, without work regulation, would already do it. They would massively invest into working from home because it would be more productive, but they aren't doing it. Why do they prefer to have their employees sit in a car and commute? Because people actually do more when they are at work together with other people who are working, who motivate them, whom they can talk to for help, right? Then if better talent pool, if that were true, why is it not done already? It isn't done apparently because the benefits in effectivity from people working at a workplace outweigh those from reaching more people at home, right? So the incentivizing is necessary precisely because it's less productive. So government should have made a case about showing why we need to incentivize work from home because companies won't do it because it's not productive enough. And this case is something we haven't heard, right? Why is it also going to be less effective? Procrastination. The Economist has shown in a very funny article that looking at Facebook posts 20 times a day is akin to drinking a few beers or smoking pot before work. I think it's much more likely that people at home will procrastinate because they are in an environment where they spend their leisure time normally, and that is what they associate with their home. This will lead to them becoming less effective and actually having to work more to fulfill the same productivity goals that their employer sets, right? The work-life balance is also entirely destroyed by work being always on your mind. So I'm sorry for closing government. I think I'm out of time. Sorry. Thirdly, right, as my partner has proven, the impact on the family life is going to be devastating because let's face it, the dichotomy we have here is either somebody is working permanently in small shifts, then I think the family life suffers from a severe disruption as currently my family life is, or my work, because I'm working so sort of to say on the weekend and all the time, this of course disrupts the way I can meet with family and friends. Or you have big shifts akin to working normally, and that means no family life can take place. If your employer says you can work from 9 to 5 online and then we'll shut your VPN account, what is going to happen? You're not going to say at 10 a.m., oh, now is the time to care for my child for 3 hours. That's not going to happen. So either there's no change from status quo, or status quo regarding family life gets worse, right? So I think in the end, all of the big benefits that opening government productivity has been disproven, right? The benefits that migrants have and people living in expensive cities is something we can much better fix through changing the cities, right? And the benefits for the very small amount of people that actually need telecommuting is something we're willing to give them. But on a large societal extent, we think staying at the workplace and driving there is good for society and the workers. Please oppose.
Thank you very much for this fine speech. And I invite the member of I invite the member of government to extend the case on government side. Hear, hear.
One quick check. Virtual backgrounds, we banned them.
I am really sorry.
The rule was we're allowed to use them as long as they're not distracting to other people.
I wish the tech guide were clear. Oh well, go ahead.
Okay, can you hear me? Okay, two main things that we are going to talk about today are discrimination for reasons other than the amount of money you have or the place that you're located at, and the influence on the global economy and specifically on the brain drain and the developing countries. But before that, a lot of rebuttal to opening a position. They tell us, oh, the work-life balance is going to be screwed. The work-life balance is screwed right now because there are employers that demand that their employees stay longer at work and don't pay them for those extra hours. There are employees who want you to answer your email after your work is done. And there are employers that don't do that. So either you do that or you don't do that. So if you as an employee now put up with having to reply to this email after hours, or if you put up with staying at home, then yeah, you will put up with similar things when you are staying at home. However, if you didn't put up with them, and in many places we have strong labor regulations, or we have just the culture that tells you that no, employers cannot require that, we don't see why this situation changes. Basically, there is no reason for it to be comparative. Okay. And even if your work-life balance gets screwed a little, you don't spend that hour on commute and you save time anyway. Even if in Europe commute is shorter, it's at least 1 hour, but normally more than that, 1 hour a day there and back. They tell us that, oh, women are going to suffer because they care for kids. You know, as soon as coronavirus pandemic ends, all the children go back to their kindergarten because everyone is fed up with having to care for them all the time. We see no reason why people will abandon daycare when the pandemic measures that prevent them from accessing it are ceased. And you know, men also love their children, and men also might take up some of those parental opportunities that they are taking up more and more in the current economy. Okay. Also, they tell us, well, you know, you are going to browse Facebook. You browse Facebook at work now, okay? So to the extent that your boss can walk up behind you and see that you're on Facebook, your boss can also require you to install software on your computer that will track what you do, as many bosses do now. And that is why we don't see any drop in the productivity. and you also can improve your, like, you can set up your table just like you want. You can maybe work different hours if it works for you, and so on. POI from OO.
The pool of people who could be hired becomes significantly bigger. This also means that you become significantly more expendable, which then means that you are much, much less likely to talk up to your employer and change things.
It's great. The pool of people that can be hired is more, but the pool of companies that you can go to work at is much, much larger. That means that at least it's a wash on this point. Okay, now to our point. We believe that apart from what the opening government told you, there are a lot of people that are discriminated right now in the workforce. There are people who are introverted or somewhere there on the autumn spectrum, for whom it is very hard to endure constant contact with other people in social settings. And right now they don't actually have access to a lot of work because they are marginalized into the only types of work that can be done out of their homes, or they like the selection of those opportunities for them is much longer. Just as the opening opposition tells us, people who are beautiful, people who are sociable, people who have good communication skills that have nothing whatsoever to do with the things they are paid for are getting promoted because their bosses like them and for no other reason, while discriminating the people who may not be as beautiful, as tall, or not be able to dress as well, and those people get poor jobs. Also, with women, there are implicit biases in how you value or judge what people of different genders say. If you have less personal communication, if more of that is done through the internet, then those implicit biases are going to work not to such an extreme extent. Okay, but what is also extremely important, right now, a huge number of developing countries are experiencing a brain drain. If you are from a developing country, you want to get a good job, you want to go to the developed country and work there. The vast majority of people who do that don't come back, don't send money to their families because they take their families with them. That means that those developing countries, they are robbed of their most clever, most skillful, most promising individuals. And that means that those individuals are not spending money in their home country. Those individuals are likely not voting in the elections in their home countries, are not organizing movements, not pushing their government to change something. Those individuals, they are not providing their friends that they make in their own country with the opportunities that they get by being part of a large multinational corporation. We believe that in the status future, if we implement this measure, a lot of people working in those companies will be people from developing nations, but those people will have much fewer reasons to move. And that means that they remain in their home country. And their home country is much likely to be lifted out of poverty because you are going to be using your Western wages to buy local products, to go at a local cafe, a local hairdresser. You're going to be changing institutions and providing opportunities. And that is why, that is also a global change as different from the individual country change. And that's why we're proud to propose. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this fine speech. And to introduce the last team into the debate, I invite the member of the opposition. Here.
Hello, hello. Can everyone hear me? Fantastic. Panel, the thing to remember in this debate is that GovSide is proposing an incentive scheme to promote working from home above its naturally existing level of adoption, right? Necessarily, this means moving capital into companies that are adhering to work from home initiatives and punishing companies, if not directly, at least against their competitors for failing to do so or failing to fit into the categories that benefit from this kind of move. I have seen no reason throughout GovBench to justify this trade-off against all of the harms that it brings. They tell me that they give me many examples of cases in which it will work well, and I'm sure that it will work well in some cases. But I have no reason to believe why there is a benefit to pushing jobs which would naturally fall away from working at home into that category. I see no reason to do that. With that in mind, two things in this speech. Firstly, an in-depth analysis of how the economy suffers at the point that we accept this policy, and then secondly, a further examination of the personal lives and health of workers caught up in this move. Firstly, I want to respond to one or two things we got from the speaker we just heard. Right, to the idea on the issue that there are some people who fall into groups or suffer from conditions that predispose them to either difficulty working in groups or make them the target of various biases. We think it is in the interests of companies to assist employees to feel safe and be productive in most cases, and it is certainly the case that some people actually work better around groups and in physical settings. Right. It is just the case that some people fall on one side of this problem, and some people fall on the other side. I have no reason out of government, and I don't think there is a good reason the government could give to choose to bolster the people who happen to work better working from home rather than the other. And especially on the bias point, I think this can only work to a certain extent, in that it can only help to counteract a certain number of biases in a certain number of situations. There are just systemic biases, to name one example, those which involve the schools that people came from, or the areas from which the area in which they were born. These are the kinds of biases which simply cannot be counteracted on a large scale through this policy. Right. So how does the economy actually end up suffering in the ways which are particularly harmful when this idea comes into practice? Right. Firstly, productivity falls. Now, OO addressed this somewhat through their point about work-life balance, but we think it goes beyond that. We think it is most especially about the opportunities for mentorship, about the opportunities to build a close personal relation over lunch breaks and over non-work related activities with somebody who can help you and assist you in gaining the skills which can help you make your work slightly better. They're the kinds of things that if a more senior member of staff was, say, putting on a presentation about how to train up some younger people, they wouldn't necessarily think, oh, there's this little thing about how I do my job that makes me do my job better, that they would put in that presentation. But it's little things that you pick up from working alongside somebody else, that, oh, I can format these reports in this way. Oh, I can produce something this way. I can think about this problem in this way, organize it in this way. Those kinds of little tweaks to how you do things simply don't come across when you're so separated from somebody who is actually doing work. Also, it's an aspect of interdependence and just close personal closeness with other people in the workplace. You're able to interact with people on small issues and in small scales on the level that you just can't whenever everyone's in a massive Zoom call like this one and all trying to get an important point across. It also cannot be undervalued the importance of the environment in which you work. Right, everyone working around each other and just like as a byproduct of working, encouraging other people to work is a huge part of what helps people stay productive. Because when you're just left alone with your block of work for your day and your own thoughts, one of two things happen, and both of these things can happen at the same time across a workforce. You either feel overstressed because you think, oh my goodness, everyone else is also at home and they're all working all the time, and I've just taken another break to go and get another cup of tea, and you get overstressed to that point, or you feel undermotivated because people aren't working around you and encouraging you to keep at it. Both of these issues can play at the same time, and it's very difficult to coordinate over a physical distributed distance, encourage people and find ways of moving past that. Secondly, on the economy, this problem particularly hits hard startups. I'll take a POI in a minute. Startups and small businesses, because these kinds of businesses have a reliance on small, close-knit workforces who intimately understand the needs of their business, the needs of the people who employ them, and are able to help in a short-term and very quick basis, right? These are people who are able to build up close interpersonal connections, right up the structure of that small business, and are able to interact in a way that's just more close, right? These are also the kinds of businesses which need to be able to act nimbly, which can't deal with the great inertia of trying to coordinate things over online, because in order to stay competitive against the kinds of massive companies which they are actually facing up against in a market context, they need to work faster. They also take their workplace key from a local connection, from people who are around them, because these are the kinds of businesses that service niches, be that a regional niche or be that a niche of interest. These are the kinds of businesses which are producing services in an area or in a physical area or in a genre of product which nobody else is doing, and these are the kinds of businesses which need the help of these small workforces and these small nimble actions to be able to thrive, right? This is, as I say, this is a particularly problem in rural areas or areas which are poorly resourced, because I think it's been ignored up and down the board that rural areas and areas which suffer socioeconomically are the kinds of areas which don't have a very good internet connection at a basic level, right? These are the places that suffer from slow or intermittent internet provision, and those are just like absolutely fundamentally detrimental to the ability to your ability to interact in the workplace, right? The problem with this is that wages then fall against a backdrop of a fall in the cost of living, right? People are able to work for cheaper, and so you're going to see the knock-on effect on a local economy because people aren't earning enough money to keep spending in a way. We see suppressed wages shrinking a fragile economy and throttling the real-world productivity of the workforce, right? This is again and then a problem for the personal lives of the people who work them, because it is just true that wealthier and more fortunate individuals will have a better working environment to work within, because they're just going to have things as simple as extra rooms in their house. They're going to live near something green so they can look out the window and feel the fresh air, right? These are people who need a better working environment. And if you are in an area which is struggling, you are simply not going to get that benefit, and people just are able to do that when they are fortunate enough to do so, right? This is also enough, like, it is just true that in order to help everyone, in order to lift everyone up and help people help each other in a workplace, you need to have that kind of connection which you just lose on side government. People are less satisfied and more stressed and much less wealthy. Proud to stand in closing opposition.
Thank you very much for this fine speech. And to sum up the debate from the government's perspective, I invite the government whip here.
Great. Can you hear me? Thanks a lot. Well, now let's go. First of all, about closing opposition point that people in rural areas, so as in our case from foreign countries, don't have access to internet. What we tell you is that this motions, first of all, actually implies that government will subsidize access to internet. Without this motion absolutely is bullshit, but it's bullshit as such. Moreover, we say that even if the motion doesn't imply it, we say that now people have more and more interest in internet because it's a mean to which can help you to, I don't know, not to be very poor. It means that people now have incentives to push government to give them internet. It means that this internet now exists. So now let's compare us with opening government and in relation of rural areas, working mothers and so on. And with opening opposition about and closing opposition about efficiency. What we tells you that access to work for people in developing countries and benefits for economies in developing countries is much more important than output of other teams. Why we think so? So we talk about people from developing poor countries, i.e. Africa, Africa or South Asia, or to some extent maybe Latin America and so on. Why they are more important than, for instance, working mothers or people from suburbans? Because I don't think that's case of rural areas to some extent, but anyway. So first of all, we say that people from rich countries have moral duty because sometimes they were colonies and metropolitans, they plundered these poor countries and so on and so far. They are privileged, they have benefited from them, but they didn't give anything back. So it's quite okay to move balance of right in that sense. Moreover, we say that it's question of degree of need. I agree that, for instance, working mothers wants money too, but compare it with someone who is so poor that sometimes he just cannot have access access to food, not for one or two of his or her children, no, but for more significant numbers due to demographic reasons. Moreover, we say that it's question of number of people. Let us be clear, opening half cases have effect only on people who live in suburban or rural areas. We okay with it, but compare it with number of people who live in Africa, who live in South Africa, South Asia, who live in Latin America. In those countries, even demographic systematic reasons engender more significant number of people. But I think it's empirical truth that they are outnumber opening half groups. Moreover, we say that it's very important opportunity to change by your own measure. We say that if you live in suburban on outskirts, you have limited liability to move to London. We say that compare it with situation of somebody who lives in, I don't know, South Asia and want to move in London. It's more expensive for them and it's more hard for them to do this due to due to the fact that it's more expensive in sense of first money and second in terms of social connections, because you still can move from London to Manchester or Liverpool, and I don't think it's so problematic. That is why help for people in developing countries is much more important. But what is more important, one more important point in that instance of developing countries, it's question of competition. Opening government tell us that it will increase competition. We agree, but the question is how competition works. It works through a little bit later. It works through a number of competitors. We say that as soon as groups of opening government is outnumbered by groups of people from developing countries, now competition is much more significant on our side. Now, on efficiency, compare with opposition line in general. First of all, we say that their mechanic, to some extent, are applying to work from home. Second point is that their mechanics is just positive one, i.e. Inspiring or in sense some kind of that. But what we tell you is that our mechanics is both positive and negative. In sense of positive, we tell you that now we have selection system without nepotism due to the fact you are beautiful or handsome, due to the fact that you are more attractive to other people for your charisma, but it still doesn't have any sense in your work. Moreover, we say that you still want to be the best in capitalism system for prestige, for money, for promotion. You still have opportunity for small talks, but they actually distract you at the office. It's not true that work in office is more efficient. Or says, compare for some reasons, companies do not, a little bit later, do not allow working from home. We say that first, it's changing before COVID, and particularly after that, it's true. Moreover, we say that it can be just an example of past dependence. World didn't face such a significant and long-standing experience of home working. Now it exists and people now are keen to this. Why this is important? It means that in economies of developing countries, for all reasons, just a second, for all opening position, not to, yes, yeah, opening position question.
So companies are much more incentivized to be outsourcing their work to cheaper places to work at home options, therefore also paying the cheaper wage, therefore creating outsourcing and no benefit to poorer people.
Yeah, that's perfect. We say that you have balance between poor people in London and poor people in, I don't know, Nigeria. We prefer people in Nigeria to help them. Fuck those privileged scum. What we say that economy, finally, about dilution of difference between work and leisure. First of all, you are the best judge of your interests. That is to say, you have more opportunity to create comfort atmosphere at home. You have more opportunity to control your work-life balance. You anyway have 1 or 2 hours per day to use it in your ways. Moreover, you can now interact with family a lot to feel perfect. Moreover, we say that we cannot it's question of time. We have no reason why people can't create everyday habits to discipline themselves. For instance, I just smoke and don't give a fuck about working from home. Moreover, we see no real difference between status quo, because you are now can be distracted even if you work from home. We are very proud to propose.
Thank you very much for this fine speech. And for the last speech of the debate, I invite the opposition whip here.
Can you hear me? Government's material never matters if productivity reduces. Benedict proves that this happens, so that means that we beat both opening and closing government. Cool. I'm going to do three things in this speech. Firstly, discuss what closing brings up with their third world case, then what Benedict uniquely brings to this debate and why he wins it, and then talking about opening's case on accessibility, productivity. Cool. Closing. They firstly respond to us by saying that like governments have an incentive to help people within rural communities and other areas where you don't have internet. I think that this never happens when the infrastructure problems that your opening already addresses to discussing how there's often bad infrastructure within these areas. I am unsure why when governments still see that these areas are don't have a higher population, so aren't seen as political strongholds. I am unclear why they have an incentive to help the people within these areas when they're low populated and not seen as like areas that specifically need these helps. I think this especially is true for closing's case, even more than openings, because they're talking about international spheres. I think that when a government is incentivizing people to employ like people online in the UK, I am unsure why they necessarily do this, like why they're going to send money over to India to help them have better internet access. I think that like there's obviously a differentiation of the amount of resources that you have within a country, and I think that that means that like you don't necessarily get all of those benefits in closing government. Cool. Closing government's case. They firstly talk about how you save time on your commute. It is specifically a good thing that you leave your house. That's like one of the major points of opposition when cabin fever exists. That means that you have to have an ability to actually leave to make sure that you have like time to yourself and all of that. Then they discuss how like there's a lot of people who cannot work because they don't like social interactions. Firstly, as Benedict already discusses, there's people who like to be social, so I'm unsure why this people that they speak about are like more important than the people that specifically need like social interactions to do well, like especially within a work environment where that often helps productivity and like does a lot on that. Then additionally, like this is also an extreme version of the way that you can help these people. Like you can probably use resources to help specific people that need to like not have as much social interaction that doesn't affect everyone and makes everyone work at home. I think that that's probably a very extreme measure, and I don't know why this is a specific thing that needs to help them. Then, and additionally, they discuss how promotion means that you're like more likely, like doesn't happen on a social sphere anymore. I think that promotions will still be social when you still have to Zoom, like meet people, and you can still see their charisma and stuff on those platforms. I am unclear why that necessarily doesn't like rely on social things. Then they discuss like how you have less personal communication, so that means the biases that you have against groups like women are likely to be reduced. Often people have preconceptions. When those preconceptions aren't addressed and aren't tackled within a like work environment where you often interact with the same people, that means that those preconceptions are likely to stay or get worse because you still believe in them. But additionally to that, I think that when you especially have to choose to meet people, because you can like, even if I'm a work buddy with someone online, I can like message them and be like, do you want to Zoom tonight? Like presumably bosses are much more likely to do that with people that they know, people that they think like they see as like in a similar like background to them, the people that went to Eton or all of that. I think that means that women and people who already are excluded are even more excluded when you have to actively choose to engage with these people, and I think that's unlikely to happen for these people. Then they discuss how like people from developing nations are more likely to get jobs in higher businesses. Discrimination exists, or like so much. I am like a UK study found that if you had a very British name, you are much more likely to be accepted on the same CV as if you had an ethnic name. I think that is especially true for people who come from lots of other places. So I think that that's not necessarily something that happens. Even if this discrimination doesn't exist on a like racial basis, I think that it still exists on the school you went to, the university, the prior jobs that you had. That when that is much more accessible to people within Britain or people within Germany or wherever, like I think that means that these people are explicitly excluded, when often universities within like Asian countries and African countries just don't have the same prestige that you do within European and North American countries. Then also I think that like a bit of backlash probably happens, and like presumably like already there's a lot of rhetoric that those people already come and take our jobs. Presumably when that happens to the elite who have a lot of political capital because they are at the top of society, and like a lot of cases seem to rely upon like banks and stuff, when it happens to these specific people, they presumably vote in a very negative way. Then they discuss about how you're not you're not employed based upon looks and charisma. I think this isn't the way that most people like choose employment, so I don't think this really matters. But, so what does Benedict talk about? Opening mentions the increasing of productivity. This part is limited to them saying you don't have distractions or you have spontaneous ideas and like you can do group projects. We extend upon this by talking about how you like have personal closeness and ability to become better. This is especially important for new employees because they have an ability to interact with people and see the way that this actual like workplace does things. We also like this also extends upon startups. Like these are businesses that are untouched by our opening and are so important where they often fill in niches and create important innovations. I'm going to discuss the restrictions point and then opening, but I'll take a pee away from them first before I run out of time.
Hi, just a clarification on the opposition stance. Opening up says in one breath that people will overwork because now their work will permeate their home. In another breath, they say that they won't work enough because they'll procrastinate at home. I just want to know which stance you agree with.
Because you work more hours because you weren't as productive. Like literally the one feeds into the other. So I don't think that we actually like that actually contradicts. Cool. So Benedict also discusses the restrictions that don't allow people to work as well because of quality when you don't have the same access to the same amount of resources. I think this really affects people. So what does opening talk about? They firstly talk about how this creates a lot of recruitment within rural areas. I think we've already addressed this and this is unlikely to happen. Then they discuss how like you are no longer need to leave your family so that you could get the cheaper accommodation. I think that like you have to weigh this against other things. I think when like you often like are unable to lead, cool. Then they also discuss how you no longer have to like have a sitter. I think that this really limits the amount of like interactions you actually have to have with a child or do domestic work. Like often this is so much time that you can't also be doing a really heavy lawyer job or a bank job or whatever job it is and also looking after your child. I think that like both government's cases don't work when productivity is limited, and I think that is much more important. Benedict brings all the impacts of that. For all of these reasons, I urge you to side with closing opposition.
Thank you very much for this fine speech and for the debate as a whole in general. If I can ask you now to leave